as Nikki's just said, actually in Spain at present on holiday. So I hope everyone can hear me. I'm on my iPad, so I think following on from Helen's talk earlier, please be kind, everyone, to us, because Hattie and I are literally doing this in different countries at present. So I'm Jenny Foster, I'm from Edgehill University, and my co-presenter is Hattie, and I'll let Hattie introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Hattie, and I am currently in Sunderland, which isn't quite as warm or sunny as where Jenny is.
So we've spent the last year working on the Frontline Forum pilot for Academic Libraries North, and we were given the opportunities to come and talk about it today, and show you what it's about and what's happened, and do a short workshop around what might happen in the future. So both Hattie and I are members of the Academic Libraries North Staff Development Group, and we both have experience of leading frontline teams. So we both felt we could bring quite a lot to this. From that work with the staff development group, we were aware that there were some challenges in reaching colleagues who worked in frontline and lower graded roles with the sort of activities Academic Libraries North was doing. So for those of you who don't know, every year there's a survey around who is engaging with those activities, and consistently over the last few years, since ALN was started, the numbers for sort of lower graded staff were very low. So with that in mind, we sort of started a project which was looking at sort of the why, the what, and the how. We're sort of really getting into what was behind this, and then mapping that to a project. We came up with a pilot of the Frontline Forum. So what we're going to do today is talk to you a bit about what happened in the run up to that, what the implementation actually went, what work's been put into that, and then we're going to do sort of a mini forum at the end to get some insight and hopefully share some feedback. Hattie, could I have the next slide, please? It's all a bit 5 years ago, this, isn't it? So the concept of the forum was nearly a year in planning, and we are incredibly grateful to everyone who has contributed, and there's far too many people to name in that. Looking back, we can sort of map the project to what would be sort of described as a design thinking approach, and if any of you have worked with user experience strategies, it's very similar to that. So you start with identifying and defining the problem before going on to design a solution, and for this that meant talking to a lot of people, trying to understand why engagement was low, and what the target audience would look like. It was really important to us because other things had sort of already happened to try and sort of reach this group, that we really defined that problem really well, and got to know what the specific needs of this group were. The implementation, which we'll talk about more later, was very much an iterative process. So although the project went to the ALN board for approval, and there's run over 4 forums this year, actually each of those forums have looked slightly different, and each of them have changed slightly, because after each one we've reflected on what's happened, we've taken on board feedback, we've tried to make it better. And then finally, there will be an evaluation stage. The forum is a pilot, and therefore it needs proper evaluation, just like any project does. And that evaluation will look more at the strategic side of things, more at sort of like what impact it's had across the teams in ALN institutions, and what the benefits are. It's going to be more in-depth reiterations, but it will sort of pull on them. So looking back to that problem, we knew there was low engagement from colleagues with ALN activities, and that, like I said, that was really well evidenced. There was no doubt about that. But actually, when we delved into that, there was also a lack of awareness of what ALN was. So, for example, when the University of Sunderland did a survey with their teams, Many of them didn't know, many of the frontline teams didn't know what ALN were, and even fewer had actually attended any events. So it went beyond sort of just sort of, you know, having time to attend things. It was actually, you know, there was sort of inference from that, you know, ALN wasn't for them. This was further complicated. So when we spoke to colleagues elsewhere, it was very clear that library wasn't the only thing that online teams were doing. And certainly in the case of my team, we deliver on behalf of all student support services in the university. So sort of academic libraries north as a relevant thing to a team that is actually delivering multiple services is also a bit of a stretch. However, on the flip side of that, individuals wanted staff development opportunities. They expressed a need for it. Where they did know about ALN, they said they wanted more things which were for them, but also sort of vocalised some of the sort of challenges around working in these roles. So being able to access some things at an institutional level because it was tailored to them, but not sort of beyond that because they didn't have time to go out and visit places and have time off desk. Time and budget constraints meant that, you know, even if things were running locally, it wasn't always an option for them. And the timetabling meant that things which ran regularly weren't always available to them. So if you only ever work at the beginning of the week, something that only runs on a Monday, at the end of the week, something that only runs on a Monday is no good to you unless you're going to sort of do that in your own time, which then isn't always possible for people who have other commitments. So that scoping worked, identified that there was definitely a need, but actually delivering that would be quite challenging for various reasons. So to look at that in a little bit more detail, what we found was that the scoping sort of was really identified a really complex range of challenges, which made it really difficult to define what training should look like for this group. While frontline teams often came under the umbrella of libraries, like I said, they were often doing a variety of tasks which wouldn't necessarily be sort of traditionally associated with what academic libraries north offer. This wasn't just around student support. In many cases, we came across teams sort of like involved with like galleries and archives and that sort of work, which is a very specialist area of sort of information studies. Part of this led us to a decision that while we didn't want to, while there was a need to deliver something, we couldn't be everything to everyone. So we had to sort of really tailor what we were doing and focus the Frontline Forum on just the work of libraries. It also revealed several obstacles in terms of timetabling and sort of the complexities that I've already touched on around attendance. And so one of the things which we wanted to do when putting Frontline Forum in place was actually sort of make it as accessible as possible, which is why, as you'll see, we move around when things happen. And very much it was felt that while there was a desire for in-person interaction, as with lots of things, it just wasn't a feasible option for this particular group of people, which is why the solution identified the need for an online collaborative space where people could come together. So what that ended up looking like was an environment that would support peer learning. It would be semi-structured, it would be as inclusive as possible, and it was really important for us to create a safe space, and we went as far as encouraging people to join with more experienced members of staff. We're offering a buddy system for people. We tried to be really clear on what rules would be, like Chatham House rules, and what that would look like for people, and what people could expect to get from the spaces. And we tried to be as flexible as possible with requirements. So we didn't ask people to have cameras on, even though we know some people would prefer that, because we also knew that some people wouldn't have cameras and some weren't comfortable. It it was very much focused on the idea of developing a community and identity, rather than sort of trying to meet all training needs of this particular set of groups. So, for example, we've never sort of really explicitly looked at sort of customer care training as part of this as yet. The other thing we wanted to do with it was feed into broader ALN initiatives. So that really important thing about getting people to not just engage with Frontline Forum, but potentially move on, engage with other activities. Hattie, do you want to move on to the next slide? So, each forum is designed to be standalone, so understanding that people work shifts and need flexibility. There's no expectation that you would have needed to attend a previous forum to attend a future one. And we hope that this would give the flexibility to people sort of dip in and out as they wanted. While we haven't recorded sessions, that was a very conscious decision to allow people space to talk without sort of being worried about it being reported back. The resources which are used in sessions, so any Padlets or presentations, are shared in a team space. Each forum follows roughly the same format, usually with a sort of themed breakout space which is advertised in advance and has facilitators which work through that. And then we have guest speakers, which are usually members of the Academic Library North, SIGS or COPS. That is all underpinned by a sort of semi-formal project group that has grown up from the initial sort of project team that Hattie and I formed, that have sort of made all this happen. And I suppose one of the things which you'll see as it come out of this is that, as with anything like this, actually the work which goes on behind it, as with the ALN conference and all the work that goes on to make today happen, is actually quite big, and we're doing that 4 times a year. Hattie, do you want to go on this?
So, as Jenny has mentioned before, we've been really keen to respond quickly to feedback. So we've been implementing suggestions received after each forum in time for the following forum. And we've also mentioned any changes at the start so participants know that their feedback has been taken on board. And this iterative approach supports the idea that the participants should be guiding the forum development. So far, we've tried to use a variety of digital tools to incorporate some interactive elements and allow different types and levels of participation. But as with anything, there's always the chance that something doesn't quite work as expected. So far that we have found that Teams can be quite difficult to work with at times, depending on how participants are accessing the forum, whether it's on a desktop app or through their web browser, and also how their institutions might have set up their own Teams accounts. We've used Menti and Padlet so far, and thankfully both of those have been quite stable, and we haven't had any technical issues with those. We've also played around with the breakout room dynamics. So depending on the number of breakout room facilitators that we've had available, we've experimented with different numbers and have found that the smaller groups do work better. But then there may be, the flip side of that may be that there might be a bit more pressure to participate if you're in a smaller group. So like Jenny mentioned before, we've always said that cameras and mics are optional, and the amount of participation in the breakout rooms can be as much or as little as participants feel comfortable with. The mix of institutions in each breakout room is also something we're working to get right. But that again depends on the proportion of participants from each institution attending each forum. So far, we've also adjusted the duration of the discussions and the frequency of breakout room sessions. So in our first forum, we had 2 breakout room sessions, but we found that was maybe a little bit too much. So since forum 2, we've just had the 1 breakout room session, and that was sort of based on direct participant feedback. We're also really mindful that we don't want to run the forum for longer than 90 minutes due to some of the initial challenges and barriers to participation that were identified. So we've incorporated breaks where we can, but still trying to be within the hour and a half. I've also played around with the balance of allowing more time for the discussion element, either in the breakout rooms or when we come back to the full forum, and also allowing different amounts of time for the presentation and Q&A. So at the latest forum, we actually switched the order of the discussion and breakout room elements and the presentation, and this change was received really positive feedback. And I think preference going forward could be to have a sort of relevant presentation first, warms people up to the discussion, and they can maybe get more out of the breakout rooms afterwards. So participants have also fed back to us that they would like something to take away. So the planning group developed an optional reflective worksheet, which could be used to record thoughts and reflections, either privately or to help the sharing of experiences with their wider teams. And we have found that encouraging appropriate attendance has been a challenge, with some more senior staff members and those who are in more of a management and team leader or supervisor role attending the forums, which could potentially take away from the experience for some of the frontline staff at which the forum is aimed. So far across the 4 forums that we have run this year, we've had over 100 individuals attending. Several have attended more than one forum, and there's a small number who've attended all 4. And we've seen some cross-sector representation of roles. It's one of the challenges that we identified at the start was sort of what do we call the forum? Who do we pitch it at? Because there's such a large variety of frontline roles across all of our institutions, and it's been really nice to see that we've had a lot of people from lots of different roles attend. So at this point, do we feel that we have achieved what we set out to do? So as a reminder, these were the aims and the objectives that we wanted to achieve. So we aimed to create a safe and collaborative environment for peer learning and support among frontline professionals. And from participant feedback, we think we're on the right lines. We've received mostly positive feedback, such as some of the comments that are shown on screen. Some feedback, such as a preference for the forums to be held more regularly, couldn't be explored at this time during the pilot due to the initial objectives of the project. And whilst some participants felt they would prefer the forum to be held in person, the online format does seem to be well received. As mentioned earlier, appropriate attendance is still an ongoing issue, and one that even participants have sort of picked up on and fed back to us about. So looking at some of the common themes that have emerged through the feedback that we've received, they tend to fall into some broad categories of improved peer connection and morale, the positive takeaways of the practical learning, and also greater visibility of frontline roles within ALN. So when asked what participants found most useful, the sharing of experiences came through as one of the most common themes, and it looks like participants really enjoyed and valued the opportunity to find out what their counterparts in other institutions might be doing and how things may be similar or they may be different. Institutions themselves, through the staff development reps, have told us that they'll continue to promote the forum to their colleagues and the positive learning and development experiences that have been generated for their staff through forum participation. So whilst there's no expectation from us for participants to share their experiences with their wider teams, we have been pleased to hear that many have chosen to do so, and that learning about practice at other libraries has enabled them to reflect on what they do in their own roles. So as Jenny mentioned earlier, we'd sort of mapped the development of the Frontline Forum onto the project life cycle. So looking back at that, the last stage at the moment is the overall evaluation of the pilot, and that will be taking place this summer, and that will complete sort of the first full round of the project life cycle. And any significant findings we find from that evaluation may take us back to the start, or we may just drop back into that iterative stage again. So now there is an opportunity for you to participate in the same style of breakout room discussion as the Frontline Forum. So we're going to use a Padlet to collate the discussion inputs, a link to which I've shared in the chat, and I'll reshare it as well before we head to our breakout rooms. So using the Padlet enables us all to see everyone's contributions from all of the breakout rooms appear in real time. And just like we've done with the Frontline Forum, the contents of the Padlet will be shared after the workshop. So questions to explore are: what frontline needs might resonate with you or your teams? Are there any barriers that exist at your institution that might limit yourselves or your colleagues from joining in with the Frontline Forum? And also, if you have any ideas how you might improve or evolve the forum. So shortly, we'll be taken to our breakout rooms where you can share your thoughts. And then when we sort of reconvene afterwards, we'll just ask if people would like to share a significant insight or challenge, or maybe an opportunity or idea for the future. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. I'll reshare the Padlet link, and then I think we'll be sent to our breakout rooms.